Good morning, everyone. We are going to learn how to assign the HMH Growth Measure Assessment today. So when you log into HMH, you're taken directly to your dashboard, which is what this is. And you get all these lovely little options to use. Now, we will usually see either messages up here or maybe in the middle. For me, it's down at the bottom. It kind of just depends on the urgency and how they organize it. But if you look for your messages, you're normally going to see your growth measure assessments available right there. Now, there's only growth measure assessments for math and for reading. There's one for growth measure reading in Spanish, but we're going to be using the math and reading one. So what you do is you'll see this little blue Get Started button. So let's do reading. We'll click on Get Started. And I am shown two different assessments. That is because I have access to all of the programs. Now, normally, you're not always going to see all of the assessments. You're usually just going to see the assessments you have access to. So for third grade, you're probably only going to see this one. For first grade, you're probably only going to see this one. For eighth grade, you're probably only going to see this one. So on and so forth. If you're in second grade, I would just do both. It gives you more data points. Having more data to figure out how your students are doing is only going to help. So let's go ahead. Let's just go with our 2 through 12 right here. And we're going to click on Assign. And so don't put 2 through 12 right there. I would just get rid of that, especially if you have a younger grade, because you don't want to overwhelm your kids. So we're just doing a growth measure reading, and then I would just put end or end of year, whatever it may be. And then you want to put your start date and your due date. Now for this instance, I cannot go past June 30th. The reason I can't go past June 30th is because that is past the test window. So you have to make sure that when you assign this test, it has to be in the test window. And they have 3 different test windows. They have one for the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. And they're usually always like a good 3 to 4 months time. So you will have ample of time to get this done if you really want to. And again, you just need to make sure you put your start time. I always put the start time as 1 a.m. and the end time as 11 p.m. just because none of the students are really going to be accessing it at these times, but it makes sure that we don't have to worry about having to have it available. Now, if you really only want them to have access to it during school hours, then just change it to be school hours. Ta-da! Now, you can also put no student submission after due date or end time. You can do that as well. They won't be able to do it after the window is closed anyways, so it doesn't really matter for this one. And then, of course, we come down here to our classes. And again, this was the 2 through 12 one. So obviously, if I were assigning this, it would be to my Brighton 5th grade. But we're going to assign it to HMH training. We just click on Assign. And now it's assigned. Yay! Now, how do we look at our growth measure assessment reports, or how do we look at reports in general? So let's go over that next. We go to reports, and this is after your students have taken the test. Once they've taken the test, then you can look at this in reports. So we're going to click on reports. And so right away, we're going to see a bunch of different stuff. This is going to be my general assessment summary report. This is going to be everything that I've tested my kids on within this class. And then we can go by a standards report. So we can look at how are the students performing on a particular standard. And then we can also go to the growth report. The growth report is where we are going to see how the students are doing in their grade level, in their growth measure assessment. So there are a couple different things. You can print the report, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It prints the report for you. Or you can export a CSV, which is going to be an Excel file, which might be a little bit easier for some people to sort through the information if they really need it. And then you can also print the report by class or by student. So if you want an individual report, I would do it by student, and you're going to get a page for each student on how they did. Now, the other thing you can do is you can change what class you're looking at. So if I wanted to look at my 5th graders, I would change to that, and I would see where we're at, and so on and so forth. So if I were to click on my HMH training class, no one has taken growth measure report in here because these aren't real students and they haven't taken an assessment. So now if I go back into Alpha 1, Now we can look at assessment, and we can look at the growth measure, math, or reading. So whichever one that any of these students in this class have taken, I can look at. So I can even look at their growth measure reading assessment from their ELA class. Or I can look at how did they do their 8th grade year before they came to me. So if we take a look at just let's go with their 8th grade year. So now we can see that that was a grade 8 test level. And then we can look at what test window do we want to look at, end of year, middle of the year, or beginning of the year. So let's look and see how they started the year, the very beginning. And then we can also go right here and we can select particular students. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to expose students on the videos. So now right here, we can see the current performance for those students. So right here, it shows far below level, approaching, on level, or above level. When they talk about level, they are talking about grade level. Are they performing at an 8th grade level? And so right here, we see a little person, little stick figure with a whiteboard. This is showing you the class average. So starting 8th grade, the class average was below level. And then we can see, if we click on these dots, we can also see the particular students that were in this area. I want to make sure we're not doing that to any of the kids. So we're going to focus on that. So now when we go down here, we see the domain performance levels. So this is overall, this is going to be for the particular subject or piece of the test. So in this instance, geometry had the highest number of red. So that means 7 students scored far below level in geometry. So what you can do is when you click on this box, so when I clicked on that red bar, that's 7, so if I were to click on it, it pops up this little thing right here. I'm covering it with a sticky note for the students, but that is where you see the create group. When I click on create group, it will take me to the group page where I can save it as a geometry specific group. So that way you can look at it and reference it later on. So now when we move further down, we see the charts. So we see student, date submitted, time spent on items, the scaled score, the performance level, so on and so forth. What you are able to do is, let's say you don't want to look at it by student based on the alphabetical order. You want to put it in their grade level equivalency. You want to see who is performing at the highest or the lowest level in ascending or descending order based on what you choose. All right, so now that I have these students' names covered up, what I've done is I have organized the chart by grade level equivalency. So since the arrow is pointing up, I have the lowest grade level and going on forward. So what it's saying is it goes from lowest to highest. That's why it has the arrow pointing up. If the arrow is pointing down, then that means it's going from highest to lowest. So all you have to do is just click on it and it'll change the order for you. So if we look over here on this particular area, we see that these 5 students fell far below level. So that means that they are more than 2 grade levels below where they're supposed to be at. So this student scored at a 2nd grade level, whereas this student scored at a 4.6 grade level. That means that they're a little past halfway through 4th grade year. The other thing you want to look at, however, is the time. You'll notice this student spent 109 minutes on their test, but this student only spent 47 minutes, and this student only spent 87 minutes. Now, a couple things you can conclude in here. Let's say that this student, just rushed through, didn't take their time, didn't actually try and do well. So that means that maybe you didn't get the best read on how they're doing. Whereas maybe this student wasn't actually trying on the test. Maybe they fell asleep and we just didn't notice it. Or maybe we saw them consistently falling asleep or messing around or not paying attention to the test. So maybe they weren't actually taking their time. But maybe this student really was trying. We saw them actively working. They were writing on a scratch sheet of paper. We could see that they were looking at the screen. They were really thinking about their answers. So we would know this is an accurate representation of how well they might do. And so we would know, okay, this student I really have to focus on because I know they're not doing very well. Whereas maybe these two, where we saw them rushing or we saw them falling asleep and not paying attention, maybe those ones we give an alternative assessment for, or maybe we kind of gauge where they're at on our own and we decipher where to put them from there. Or maybe you tell them, tough, if you can perform higher than this, you should have shown me that, and you keep them in the group they're in. Now, obviously, you don't announce to the classrooms who's performing far below level. That's not something you do. But then we can keep going and we can see, oh, it's at a 6th grade level, and this next one above them is at early on in their 7th grade year. So, you know what? I'm going to keep this below grade level kid with the approaching kids when you create your groups. Then you can go over here to on level. So these two students are performing right at 8th grade level, whereas these two students are a little past 8th grade level, like maybe a little bit into their 8th grade year. And so from here, you are able to take a look at and see what are they performing like based on their grade, which makes it a little bit easier for us to figure out, okay, this student should not be at a 2nd grade level. We need to focus on building those skills. And so you know where to meet them at based on these skills. So from there, you can create different things like groups. You can decide what they may need to work on as a class altogether. You can take a look at and see which of these areas is most important for your grade level standards, for your class standards. Maybe your 8th grade year, these students don't focus on geometry, so we're not going to worry about these skill sets. We're going to focus on these measurement, data, and probability and operations in algebra. And so that is what you can use for that.